I bring word, sire. They are said to be gathering their forces, as are your allies. It appears it will be civil war after all, despite the Darkspawn. Pity.
There was a lot of writing that went into Dragon Age. I mean, in excess of 800,000 lines of dialogue.
You must deal with the repercussions of his deeds before you can face the archdemon, unless it finds you first.
How do you never stumble? You're great.
And now you did it.
We had the possibility of sitting down with these actors and talking to them about this is who their character is, this is the arc that their character goes through.
So this line 148, I just need you to pull it back in your mind, like go back to when you lost everything.
I guess that if you have a rep for making evil characters interesting, people come back to you. And the other, of course, good thing is that they tend to be the best written.
As a writer, you get an idea in your head of what a character is supposed to sound like. And when there's an experienced voiceover actor, you get something back that is actually better.
The opportunities are limitless, really. And that's what fascinates me about it. And the opportunities for the gamer within the game are limitless. So if you engage in this game, and you might recognize my voice, I hope it will seduce you into getting further and further embroiled into my dark, dark world, until I eventually meet my fate.
One of the great things about working on Dragon Age is that the development team has really challenged itself to bring something new to the fantasy genre. It's a genre that's so saturated that we really have been pushing ourselves to stand out, to bring something fresh and unique, and I really enjoy that process.
Ferelden itself is actually kind of almost a barbaric nation, not too far away from being really uncivilized.
It's a land that was occupied by the Empire of Orlais, which is its neighbor, for a generation until it finally broke free, and all of a sudden the blight begins. So suddenly this nation that's just starting to get its feet now has to deal with a crisis that threatens to destroy it.
We're not telling a story with words alone in Dragon Age Origins. What's in the levels actually tell you a visual story and also an archaeological story as you're going through the game.
Villages and cities that have existed for hundreds of years, but they've gone through multiple iterations of war and rebuilding, so you have all these layers built on top of one another.
They'll tell of the ancient Fereldans. They'll tell of the strife with the Tevinter Empire long ago. They'll tell of the great, wondrous battles that have taken place, and you're just now walking through the sort of the ashes of these great conflicts.
We definitely pulled a lot of historical architectural reference.
We were trying to make something to where you could imagine people working, living, breathing in these spaces.
The dwarves, which are very Aztecian, Mayan influenced, very angular shapes. You have the humans, some of the Anglo-Saxon 1200 AD influences.
You know, lots of timber, lots of like rough stone. It definitely makes it feel like it's kind of almost like the frontier of a fantasy nation. The first step that you have to take in creating levels is coming up with your core concept. Every inch of a level is an opportunity for us to engage you in combat, to tell a story, or to take your breath away. For example, one of the most visually stunning places that we have is the Urn of Sacred Ashes, an ancient place built kind of at the early days of the church. We always wanted to have a very striking entrance, which gives you a sense of age and history and grandeur. You would go through and figure out what happens in every individual room, so people would have a map of what to do for the art level creation side, and also for later on for you when you're actually bringing it to life with creatures and combat.
So one of the huge advantages we had on Dragon Age Origins was the fact that we were able to do a lot of early development in the Neverwinter Nights engine.
This is the Urn of Sacred Ashes, the way that we built it in the Neverwinter prototype. We wanted to make sure that the gameplay, the story, and all the design elements really worked and fit together. And now we'll show you what it looks like in the final game. And as you're about to see, this is the same entrance in the Dragon Age engine.
That whole process can take, on a small level or a simple level, could take a week, where some of the more complex ones can take months and months and months. Yeah, that's a huge undertaking.
Ferelden is just one country on the main continent in Dragon Age universe, so there's certainly a lot more to explore and talk about in the future.
When you think of fantasy, you may think of majestic, beautiful creatures, but in Dragon Age is truly a dark, evil, and twisted world, so our intent was to turn these creatures into walking nightmares.
The concept artists really had to pull out the horror and really work with evil, paint the face of evil.
The mages had sought to usurp heaven, but instead, they destroyed it. They were cast out, twisted and cursed by their own corruption. They returned as monsters, the first of the Darkspawn.
As a concept artist, we really have two jobs. One is to build the blueprints and lay the foundation in order to actually build the things that go into creating a world. The second is to inspire the team, to create the images that really get everyone pumped up. On Dragon Age, the level of detail in each concept is staggering. Each one is a piece of art unto itself. One great example is the work of Sung Kim. The level of love he puts into this stuff is impressive. One of the best creatures for me is from the Darkspawn. It's the Hurlock. He's got that horrifying grin, permanent grin on his face with big pointy teeth. It looks like you can tell it was once a man, and that's what makes it so terrifying, is the fact that you can almost tell that its descendants were like us and that he's just been suffering for millennia. We really want to create a sense of like immediate terror, but then almost I think there's a sense of sympathy too, how you can almost tell that we could become this if we made the wrong choices.
There's over 30 races of monsters and demons. The Dragon Age art team has been working hard on these characters for several years.
There's a lot of different people and a lot of different departments that actually work on one character. It'll go from design into concepting.
Because it's very time-consuming to make it, we have to make sure we get it right on paper first, and important creatures may receive half a dozen iterations before we commit to building it.
From there, we had to figure out how to bring that piece to life from a technical standpoint. There's modeling, texturing, and rigging, and then it finally falls into the hands of the animators.
We'll work very closely with the animation team to make sure that the model's working correctly. Then we'll make sure that it gets into the designer's hands again so it can be implemented into the game and used correctly. The job of a character artist is to take the concepts and interpret it into 3D models for the world. My personal favorite creature that I got to work on Dragon Age Origins was the Darkspawn Ogre.
We tried to make the ogre so terrifying in his appearance that the player wouldn't believe that he could actually beat it in combat.
I was really looking forward to it. The concept was very unique, and it was a bit of a challenge to actually bring it into the 3D environment with the different elements.
It might seem like a strange thing to say when working on a fantasy game, but realism is a very important part of this process. If you don't believe that they're real, then none of it affects you. It's nothing.
I mean, the level of detail on these creatures is amazing. I mean, you can zoom right into any part of them from any angle, and they look absolutely fabulous.
So here we have the Pride Demon. It's one of the largest creatures in the game. From this concept, we'll make a 3D concept out of it. Once we do that, we'll take this basic mesh and we'll go ahead and paint a really detailed, sculpted model. We'll take this and we'll make a projection so we can get all these little details into a texture and then place that texture onto the mesh that you saw before. And you'll get your finished model with all its texture and glory.
Making a creature scary is more than just making it big. It's really the way the creature moves that indicates its strength, its mass, and its bulk. Animation is really about performance, and the same way that an actor gets prepared for a role in learning and studying what this character thinks, what this character feels, the animator is, it's his job to bring that to the character in a more digital form. The great thing about working on Dragon Age is that the animators have the ability to start bringing not only humanoid characters to life, but also larger characters, more interesting, dynamic characters like dragons and ogres and the undead. So this is what the ogre puppet looks like once the rigging and the modelers have finished working with it, and now the animators can take it and start making it move.
Sometimes we would just act it out, like get up and physically act out how like an ogre would move.
As you can see, when the ogre hits the ground, his entire body shakes from the massive impact of his size, and that's a really nice detail.
See the ogre finally in the game and working and animating and all its terrifying glory is actually it's quite surreal.
When you're working with such a big creative team, everyone is coming to the table with their own style, with their own techniques. And as the development process goes along and you start building a world together, it becomes one language, and that language becomes something like Dragon Age Origins.
When we set down to design the combat system for Origins, I think we were trying to modernize a classic. Baldur's Gate 2 has always been a reference point for us as the game that really let you feel like you were mixing classes, abilities, combinations, smart planning, and on-the-moment thinking. So we decided to modernize that. Realistic combat fighting styles, like actually, you know, the weight of the sword, the presence of a maul smashing into a body, all of these things are really key for us. And I think what we resulted in is something you just have to think of as like sword porn. It's for the enthusiast. In terms of looking at source material, I think you have to look at classics. You know, the Lord of the Rings, 300, and certainly, you know, even some of the older stuff. Go back to the really best fight scenes you'd find in the Conan movies even. This is a brutal time to be in, and we wanted to evoke that feeling. What we wanted to achieve was the sense that you could be both the general, lieutenant, that kind of commander role, as well as the guy just leading the charge. So we've put together several systems, including a tactics system that lets you fully control the AI of your characters, and of course just smart reactions to the way the enemies occur. So you kind of have that moment where you plan. You see the enemy, you're thinking like, how do I enact this grand strategy to make these characters do as much friggin' damage as I can? And then once you charge in there, the battle's just a swirling melee. You've got positioning, moving your rogues around behind so they're just jamming their swords into kidneys. You have your warriors just holding that line, and your mages kind of holding the back line, just raining death upon your foes. So it's very in your face once you're engaged, but you always have that little moment just before where you go, oh, I know what's coming, and here's my plan. Often what you want to do is deal with the strategic impact of the equipment and the talents that you've chosen. So you want to try and mix your characters for maximum effectiveness. All characters have a sense of whether they're being flanked or whether the character's directly behind them. There's direct bonuses to everyone who's making attacks from those kind of harder to defend arcs. Even the sense of, you know, what weapon, what side are you using can affect things like sweeping attacks when you're swinging double weapons. You can certainly use barricades, walls, things like that to block incoming enemy fire, so you can actually make advances carefully under cover. And then things like elevation really do play into the mechanics as well. Even what you wear affects the tactics you're going to employ in Dragon Age Origins. The heaviest armors in the game are going to protect you, but at the same time, they're going to slow you down. You're going to be fatigued just by wearing them, so you won't be able to pull off as many special moves. Finishing moves are the way that we've managed to basically imply that the combat has a momentum. Finishing move is this awesome visceral moment where it's, you know, sword through the chest, boom, off comes his head. You know, smashing a guy with a maul so he goes spinning through the air and lands in front of you. Or possibly killing a really large creature by actually climbing on top of it and jamming your blade in.
We had some stunt actors from the movie 300, like doing some cool swings, cool death blow moves.
And it's not just about flash. As you wear your opponents down, the game is dynamically adjusting the incidence of these happening. We're essentially rewarding your combat dominance. As your opponents are worn down, their morale's starting to break, and you are just crushing them on the battlefield, you'll notice that your characters are finishing them with far more frequency. More heads come off, more chests are pierced. It's pretty fantastic. Designing combat isn't just about, you know, rules and a couple of animations. It's about the entire experience as far as I'm concerned. When a player comes out of a combat, what I really want is that sense of tension and then that release of, man, look at what I just pulled off, that sense of orchestrating something. I don't want to make a game that just softballs and you're like, oh yeah, I killed that guy again. No, I want you to feel challenged and like you were rewarded for playing smart. For me, one of the most exciting parts, I think, will be the war stories. You know, the forum posts, the water coolers. People even on the team are already discussing ways they dealt with boss X. And that's pretty cool and very, very, very rewarding because it feels like the game was one that they played and it was for them.
Dragon Age is a big game. And while that's a great value for the consumer, it's a giant pain in the ass.
There was a lot of long nights, there's a lot of hard crunch, but I mean, when you're working on something that you love, you don't really mind so much.
Working with our team was awesome. I mean, everybody put in 110%.
It was big. At our peak, we were around 150 people, but we really came together as a team. And it doesn't really matter anymore if you're a programmer or you're an artist. It just matters that you want to make the best thing possible.
I think one of the greatest challenges was understanding that our audience has grown up. The industry as a whole is older. It's not this thing relegated to kids anymore. And understanding that what we almost had was a mandate to make sure that the game had punch.
In some ways, we felt like we were out to prove ourselves as not only a team, but as a company again. And I don't know, that was something that was very exciting.
Dragon Age is a funny game in some respects because it's something that you're not going to understand the breadth of it and the scope of the world until you sit down and you actually find yourself in the middle of it, and then you'll be like, wow, there's so much here.
Dragon Age is a universe that has a story that spans thousands of years. Dragon Age Origins takes place over maybe a year, maybe 2 years at most, depending on how exactly you're playing it. So as you can imagine, there's hundreds and hundreds of additional stories to tell in this same space. And I think you're going to see a lot more coming from us soon.
Dragon Age is about dominating the battlefield. It's about that moment when you charge, that tension of not being certain, and then seeing your characters slice heads off, throw spells, set things on fire, until essentially you bring it to a crashing close and say, yeah, this one I won, now I've got 400,000 more to go.
Dragon Age is really a return to the thing that brought me to BioWare in the first place. When I started at BioWare back in Baldur's Gate 1 days, we were making the pinnacle of fantasy gaming, and I think we've really come back to that with Dragon Age Origins. What we've done is we've taken the best of high fantasy and the best of darker, lower fantasy and combined them into one game. So you're taking, like the Tolkien, the overarching good versus evil metaphor that draws you through a high fantasy game, but the darker, grayer choice and consequence of something like a George R.R. Martin or a Conan, and we combine them. So you're playing as a Grey Warden, you have to save the world, but the way you do that sometimes means you have to make some pretty tough choices.
I think with Origins, what we managed to hit is a note of the familiar and yet the uncanny. It's certainly a game that's going to have elves with pointy ears. Yeah, we're not going to change. The dwarves, many of them do have beards, for sure. But within those expectations, we understand them well enough ourselves that we've managed to break a lot of them and say, you know, sure, the elves do have pointy ears, but they're also, up until recently, enslaved and live in ghettos in the city. This kind of puts you in a place where you know what you're dealing with an elf, but you don't know what you're dealing with when it comes to Dragon Age. It's a different setting for the familiar to occur, and it will surprise you.
It's very, very complicated and intricate. And I mean, this game not only looks realistic, in a way, the story also is quite realistic.
You would attempt to put a puppet on the throne, and every soul here knows it. The better question is who will pull the strings.
So this is a world already with a lot of conflict going on, and now when we start off Dragon Age Origins, a blight, there's these Darkspawn rising back from under the ground are coming to consume the earth once again, and this is what you're fighting against.
Farewell, Mother. Do not forget the stew on the fire. I would hate to return to a burned-down hut.
Bah! 'Tis far more likely you will return to see this entire area, along with my hut, swallowed up by the blight.
All I meant was...
Yes, I know.
The characters in the game aren't two-dimensional. The way that a player interacts with them is going to change who they become.
They have their own motivations and their own desires and their own hopes and dreams.
You're going to have party members talking to each other, they're bantering.
Having Morgan and Wynne in your party at the same time, because they're both mages but coming from very different schools of thought on magic, there's going to be a lot of bickering, a lot of different discussion on the way magic works, just by having those two people in your party.
They're reacting to everything that you do. You'll take an action in the world, and a party member will speak up, and perhaps they'll object, perhaps they'll approve, and you may change your course of action based on that, or suffer the consequences, right? The consequences are what the game is all about.
It's like dancing on a field of razor blades, so it may be possible to make it through Dragon Age Origins with everyone happy, but you're going to have to be really careful about what you're doing.
There was a lot of writing that went into Dragon Age.
It appears it will be civil war after all, despite the Darkspawn. Pity.
When people talk about the world in the game, it's with the idea that there's more than what they're talking about, and I think that comes across to the player, right?
No one has a place here. Your farmers wish to be merchants. The merchants dream of being nobles, and the nobles become warriors. No one is content to be who they are.
When I play games, you can tell very quickly, usually, if what is present is all that's been created. And then there's other times when you're reading a book or when you're playing a game, and you can sort of feel immediately that there's this whole breadth of history that the game creator is just dying to get you to fall in love with. And that's what I'm hoping, that the fans will get into this world and they will fall in love with it and see exactly what we've put together for them and value it.
The sound design of Dragon Age is about creating the immersion in a world of dark fantasy. Dragon Age is probably the biggest game I've ever worked on and is about the size of 3 of the biggest games that I've ever worked on combined. Mythical creatures are probably one of the most challenging things to do in sound design.
We have a breakdown of the Deep Stalker, a couple of different samples used, one of which is a human imitating a cat. The cat itself, a lizard, and lastly we have a dolphin. Let's mix them together, you get this.
I think you'll find that the audio experience of the cinematics is on par with what you will experience in a movie. You have a huge full-scale battle, enormous changes in perspective. You have very strong emotional undertones to the whole scene, so you're moving between telling the story from an emotional perspective and telling it from an action perspective.
Warriors and mages, barbarians and kings. Grey Wardens sacrificed everything to stem the tide of darkness and prevail.
So the making of Dragon Age audio was a team collaborative effort. 10 guys putting everything they've got into bringing that fantasy to life. They pulled off what was really a massive task. It sounds way better than I anticipated it would sound. The sound design of Dragon Age is about creating the immersion in a world of dark fantasy.
The darkness of this game really is being enhanced by the music, and the music really goes beyond dark.
They returned as monsters, the first of the Darkspawn.
We actually have the Seattle Northwest Sinfonia play all the music for us.
The score is epic in both its grandeur and orchestration. It's also epic in the amount of music that we had to compose.
I think I've composed about 6 to 7 specific themes, but I also had to make sure that the score is cohesive enough. I took what we call the main theme and then I'm weaving it underneath all the time. If not the actual melody, I'm doing the harmony. If not the harmony, some elements from the rhythm. But you could always hear some elements from the Grey Warden's world.
I'd be going back to review scenes that I previously had the temp music in, and a scene would go from being maybe flat or comic to really engaging me.
I think that actually what I really enjoyed to work on this game was actually the songwriting.
Simon, I believe, called Anon up and said, you know, here is a set of lyrics that the writing team has come up with. You know, why don't you and Aubrey collaborate on something? The very next morning, Anon called me up and said, I have something, come over and record it. And I said, okay. And I came over and I really connected with it right off the bat. And we sewed it up, you know, and sent it over within 24 hours.
She has a great melodic sense, and many times she will just, you know, sing almost exactly what I wrote, but then she will make this little change.
I think it's probably one of Enon's best scores. It's certainly the best score that I've worked on.
Simon Pressey, I mean, he basically was guiding me from one hand, letting me fly, but from the other hand, really directing my flight path. And I'm dedicating this score for you, the gamer. I know that you guys are just avid, most of you, and I could understand why, because, you know, in many years I was this way, and I think that you're about to engulf into an amazing adventure, and I just envy you because this is going to be your first time, and I already know what's going on.
Hey everybody, it's Ricardo, and I am here talking with Mike Laidlaw from BioWare about Dragon Age Origins. It's a game we have been digging ever since we first saw it, and you guys are showing off a little bit more today, so tell us about what we're checking out.
Well, we're checking out a couple of things. First off, we talked about kind of the aspects of violence, lust, and betrayal that really define the game. You know, definitely kind of the bloody nature, the mature kind of, you know, challenges that we're putting before the player, both, you know, I think both in combat and emotionally. And when we talked about betrayal, we actually set up a scenario for our demo today, which was Uldred, one of the high enchanters of the Circle of Magi, his demonic corruption, and your need to put him down.
We got a chance to see some refined spell stacking, which it seems you all have worked to make a little more user-friendly.
Yeah, spell combos are essentially where you're able to make two effects, you know, pile together and actually cause a third effect on top of them. So one we've shown off in the past was being able to lay out field of grease, enemies are slipping and falling, set fire to it with a fireball. You know, that's very cool. What we realized is it wasn't very conducive to the player getting exactly what was happening, because in the hectic, you know, nature of battle, you might see it happen but not register it. So towards that end, we have a full codex system that's tracking, you know, the lore of the game, the history of the world, but also events like spell combos firing off. And then once you've pulled it off, it tells you exactly how you did it, so you can repeat it again and make it part of your tactics.
Now, one of the really cool things that the game is benefiting from is something like Mass Effect. So explain to us sort of how the Mass Effect experience that BioWare's had has benefited Dragon Age.
Well, Mass Effect, I mean, it did a number of amazing things, but really the digital acting technology they pioneered was just fabulous to work with. So we have, you know, characters with more emotion, characters with more depth, some really subtle stuff like head tilts, all that we have control over. So we can take, you know, the performances we got from our voice actors and really bring them to life. So the characters are just stronger. And when you're going for a game that has punch, you know, that's got sexuality, it's got just this raw kind of brutal nature to it, you've got to make sure that the characters can react appropriately, especially when you're doing what we're doing, where you have the different origin stories, the different you know, starting points for your character, and we want people to react to those too.
Now, hopping over to gameplay, you mentioned accessibility, and you know what we saw did seem to go, you know, pretty smoothly on a PC, but obviously the big question is how this all going to work on consoles, because we haven't seen those yet.
It's true, and we're actually hoping to debut those soon. What we're doing right now is actually prototyping the console controls, and my main goal with designing them is to make sure that they feel like they're native to the platform. You know, that for the most part involves just understanding what are the key strengths. So moving to things like radials, quick buttons, you know, and just understanding the strengths and weaknesses of the platforms.
I'm sure you guys have been sort of looking at the game from a number of different angles. About how long is it? How much content can we expect to go through?
What we've been finding is your average playthrough, and by that I don't mean completionist, has actually been clocking in around 80 hours. It has been, it's pretty epic. And the nice thing is, beyond that, again, you have 6 different origin stories, so the game begins in 6 different ways. There's a lot of replayability to be had.
All right, well, I guess the next big question is, when do we get our hands on it? When do we play this thing?
You'll be looking at fall this year, and you'll be seeing it on PC, Xbox 360, and PS3 all the same day.
All right, thank you very much.
Alright everybody, GDC 2009 is winding down, but we've saved one of the best games for last, and that game is Dragon Age Origins. I'm joined by gameplay designer Mike Laidlaw, who's here to tell us about the game. Now, Mike, let's talk about this quest you were showing us earlier. It takes place in the city of Redcliffe, sort of a village under siege. It's being attacked by the Blight. Can you tell us about how this quest fits into the overall story of the game? Because obviously you guys are known for very story-driven experiences, and how your decisions that you make during this quest can affect the rest of the game.
Sure can. Yeah, I'd be happy to. What you're looking at with the Redcliffe quest is, your attempt to basically gather an army to fight the Darkspawn as the Blight surges up from the south. They've already won one major victory, so you're kind of the last-ditch hope to stop them. Redcliffe's Arl, the man in charge of it up in the castle, has a big standing army. They didn't actually get any losses at the last fight, so he's one of your big allies you need to acquire. The problem is, once you arrive, Redcliffe is already under assault. There's hordes of undead pouring out of the castle every night, and they really don't know how to stop it. So, I mean, the logical thing you'd expect is, I'm going to dive in and help because, that seems, the right thing to do. But at the same time, it's also kind of a waste of your time, arguably, because it's just the villagers. Or at least that's what members of your party would tell you. So in terms of how it ties into the whole story, certainly you need to at least gain the help and gain access to the castle, find out what's happened and why the Arl kind of isn't available to lend his support, because that's what you absolutely have to do. Whether or not you defend the village is kind of up to you. I mean, it's possible to just say, I'm out of here, I'm not doing this thing. And then, of course, what we were demoing was followers kind of reacting to, like, this is a waste of time, what are you doing, right? And I mean, that's pretty poignant stuff when that happens. In terms of the overall game, you really have to pursue Redcliffe, and then we're going to see, what characters survive, what kind of things, we're constantly tracking this, what kind of rumors are even spreading about you. And of course, how do your followers feel at the end? Are they still happy to have you as their leader? Some of them might be pissed off.
So obviously this is a BioWare game, so the dialogue system is featured very heavily. So you don't have to just immediately rush into battle. You can sort of go around, talk to the different villagers to sort of tip the odds in your favor. Can you tell us about how you do that in this mission and the sort of consequences that you experience from members of your teammates who don't necessarily agree with you?
There's a whole series of things you can do to set up Redcliffe to make sure the defense is really effective. Obviously you need to either be persuasive, or sometimes you end up having to pay people like mercenaries, that kind of stuff, in order to bring them in to say, okay, look, we need to hold this line. Now, how much of that the player does is certainly up to him and what approach he takes, right? Certain people might be really persuasive and just charm everybody into it. Other people are just going to threaten everybody into it, right? Same kind of deal. Now, with those kind of things, what you see is a direct increase in the effectiveness of the other defenders. And so, if the knights are inspired, if you've been, kind of rallied the troops with your speeches, if you've gotten better equipment, that was the one we demoed today, was, getting the blacksmith to actually help. Because he was like, I'm too drunk, I don't care, my daughter is gone, right? And it's like, well, you understand that. I mean, he's kind of in this fatalistic place. You want him to basically help out because, then you can go help his daughter. If you do that, great, awesome. He's really happy. And the troops just increase in effectiveness. And then, of course, there's a reward at the end if you manage to get everybody through alive, which was the demo we saw. Some of the others earlier today, not everybody made it. In fact, the mayor didn't make it, the leader of the knights didn't make it. So some pretty serious casualties. And again, that affects later plots where you need those guys to help you out.
Well, it looks really great. When should we expect to see it in stores? And I know we mentioned platforms just a second ago, but could you go ahead and summarize those for us?
Sure, yeah. You'll be seeing it for the Xbox 360, the PS3, and the PC coming out in fall 2009.
All right, Mike, thanks a lot.
Hi, this is Jason Ocampo. I'm here with the good doctors of BioWare, Ray and Greg. Hey guys. Dragon Age, which is here at GDC. How's that shaping up?
It's shaping up to be pretty amazing. What we're doing is we're really defining a new genre of fantasy with Dragon Age. It's going to be a landmark in fantasy, an event really when it launches. Where it's going to be a new kind of fantasy. It's dark, heroic fantasy. So it's not high fantasy. It's not the dark, low fantasy. It's somewhere right in the middle, and they've got the best of breed features of both worlds. So it's kind of punching through, and I think fans are going to really notice it and see something that's memorable and worth playing when it comes out. It's going to be coming out on PC, PS3, 360. And it's sort of one way to look at it is it's the best of breed features between Baldur's Gate 2 and a game like Mass Effect in terms of its cinematic presentation and the way that the characters in the world work together. And it's great value for money. It's incredibly ambitious in terms of its scope and sheer size, and it's got a ton of cool features. So it's shaping up to be pretty damn amazing.
Now, the game was delayed. It was going to be on the PC. It was supposed to be shipping around now, and then the console versions would come later. Now the game's going to be coming, I guess, early next year on all systems simultaneously. Why the delay, and what does that get you? I mean,
It's actually coming fall 2009.
Oh, fall 2009.
Yeah, sim ship. There was basically a collection of factors why we're doing this, and one of the big ones is we just see this as an event. We see, EA and BioWare are very excited about the game, and we just think this is a landmark in fantasy. It's defining a new genre within the fantasy space, and we're just really excited to build up the momentum for it, to build a community, build the plans for post-release content, releasing the tools to the fans early as well, so they can start making content, be co-creators of the experience with us. And we're just really excited about it. Naturally, BioWare always makes good use of all the time we have. And we're, the game, as you're seeing next door, it's shaping up to be pretty damn amazing. It's a very polished experience already. It's a delight to play, and we're still improving it. We're still actually doing usability testing. The team's playing it internally, and every day it gets better. So it's on console and PC, it's going to be a handcrafted experience that's just perfectly attuned to what the fans are looking for, either on console or PC.
Dragon Age is very exciting on the DLC front. We've got a lot of big plans on Dragon Age. Something actually we said at the very beginning of the project is one of the goals. In a sense, the way we've been describing Dragon Age itself is as a platform, and the reason we call it that is that not only it's this amazing, deep, rich story, it's also the user tools that go. People can create their own content. You release the user tools in a beta format already, or in the process of it. Also, the DLC will provide a pretty continuous stream of content, new adventures, and new things to explore and do. So we're very, very pumped about that.
Well, thank you very much, guys. Thank you for the update.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right.
My name is Rob Bartel, and I am a principal designer at BioWare, and I've been working on the post-release downloadable content for Dragon Age. What we're showing here today is a piece of downloadable content called the Darkspawn Chronicles. The core idea of this is that it's an alternate history where the hero from the main game that you played had actually died in the joining ceremony, never became a Grey Warden, never became the big hero of the land, never saved the day. You actually now play as a Darkspawn, as one of the bad guys from the main game in the final siege of the city, the climax to the main game. We are deliberately tugging at heartstrings. We're deliberately putting you in a situation where, Dragon Age as a whole is all about moral choices. It's all about the gray areas, and it's all about consequences. So this is still in keeping with that same tradition, and the ability to play as a Darkspawn, to find yourself faced with the very people that you grew to love, but now they're your enemy. And what does that say about the whole experience of Dragon Age and the meaning that you brought into the game on your first playthrough? So Darkspawn Chronicles is just as much a story of absence, a story of the lack of a hero, as it is the story of the anti-hero, the Herlock Vanguard that you play. The Herlock Vanguard has been given an element of free will by the Archdemon, and has been tasked with leading the siege of the city as a vanguard force. So one of the key abilities that you have right at the beginning of the game is the ability to recruit thralls, recruit any Darkspawn you see into your party and command them to do as you will, just as the Archdemon commands them. And there's also the counterpoint to that, which is, well, you know what? Your time is done here. You've met my needs. You've served my whims. I'm tired of you, poor Genlock. I'm going to use my execute thrall ability and go in there with my blade, decapitate you, and move on. The life of a Darkspawn thrall is cruel, short, brutal, and not to be mourned. The loyalty system that you're familiar with from Dragon Age Origins is still there, but we've put a dark twist on it. It's all about fear and respect now. And your followers, your thralls, gain fear and respect for you when they see you kill the enemy. So they want to follow a powerful leader, one who is unafraid. So as you kill, they gain approval for you, and that unlocks new special abilities for them, new special benefits. So on the one hand, yes, you can execute your thralls at any time and get new ones, but there's also a benefit to nurturing your thralls and raising them to be a powerful fighting unit from the very beginning. There's actually an achievement if you can keep the original ogre from the opening area. If you can keep that same ogre alive throughout the entire game and end the module with it, you unlock an achievement there. We are going to be continuing to support the Dragon Age franchise with downloadable content for some time to come here. So with Dragon Age Origins, we've already put out a lot of content. We put out Awakenings as an expansion pack. We're continuing to support the franchise and moving forward, and Darkspawn is just another link in that chain. My name is Rob Bartel. I'm the principal designer for the Dragon Age premium content, the downloadable content that we're putting out. And you can expect to download Darkspawn Chronicles on May 18th for PC and 360. It will follow shortly on the PlayStation Network, and we look forward to hearing your response to it when it comes out.
Hey, this is Randolph here. We're speaking with Fernando Mello. He's the online producer for BioWare, and we're chatting about Dragon Age Origins Awakening. Fernando, first of all, can you briefly tell us what this game is all about?
Yeah, so Awakening is a way for you to continue your story in Dragon Age. It's set about 6 months after the events of Origins, and you have an opportunity where you as the hero of Origins can continue your character or start from scratch.
Okay, so this is essentially going to be a retail expansion pack. How many hours are you planning to add to the Dragon Age experience?
It's a really good question. Actually, the first thing that tended to come out of Origins that we realized is that hours was a really poor way to try to communicate just how much stuff was actually in these games. Awakening is cut from the same cloth. You know, in Origins we saw people that finished the game in like 30 hours. Some people were finishing in over 100, 120 hours. And Awakening very much so the same way, with the number of options that you have, party members that you bring with you, what side quests you're taking. Your mileage is going to vary quite a bit. I think what would be fair to say is that, just like with Origins, nobody's going to be disappointed with exactly how much stuff is actually in here. It's as big as most full games these days.
Now, didn't we get rid of the Blight in the last game? What's happening in this one? What's the storyline?
Well, there is still that. You mean the blood covering that you get? There is still a lot of that, and really, it really comes down to it's a very dirty world. It's a very dangerous world. There's a lot of combat, and combat is ugly. And it was something that we wanted to really evoke, that kind of feeling that these things are messy encounters when you get into sort of war situations.
What about in terms of, I guess, the characters from the original game? Are we going to see a lot of them popping up in Awakenings as well?
So you have one returning character as your party member, but you do have a lot of other cameo roles. Depending on some of the choices that you made in Origins, you'll encounter a couple of other party members, and they'll absolutely remember the relationship that you had with them at the time.
Now, you mentioned you can either continue as your old character or start a new one. What's the difference going to be in terms of gameplay?
So the really neat thing is that Awakening absolutely caters to both stories, both sides of the coin. When you're continuing your character from Origins, you are the hero of Origins. You can import your character at any time. You don't have to have finished Origins, but time has advanced 6 months beyond the events of Origins, and at that point you are considered to have been the one that ended the Blight. You are the hero. Everybody recognizes you. Everybody loves you for it. So everybody responds in a certain way. When you start as a brand new character, you are a warden, they respect you for that. But you are an outsider, you're a new character, you're coming from a neighboring country. There's a very a war past there between the two nations, so people are very mistrusting of you coming from that region, and it gives you a completely different perspective, completely different options, and different situations you'll have to deal with because of that.
What about in terms of new abilities and new spells? What can we expect?
So with every great expansion, this is sort of a throwback to old school days. It's built on top of Origins, and we've increased the level cap. And along with that, we've added tons of new things for you to do. We have over 50 new spells and abilities. There's new specializations. There's 2 specializations per class. Each of the base classes also has additional spells and abilities. We have new skills like rune crafting. You can actually create your own runes now and apply them to armors, not just weapons. And there's also lots of other stuff. There's something like over 500 new items. There's new tiers of items. So very, very quickly, once you get in, if you import your character from Origins, you're probably going to want to shed some of those items for the really cool stuff that's going to be coming up in Awakening.
Thanks for that, Fernando. Tell us when we can expect Awakening out, on what platforms we can expect it on.
Awakening will be out on March 16th, and it'll be available on PC, 360, and PS3. And on the consoles, it'll be available as DLC as well.
Thanks for that, Fernando. Now, if you want to know more about Dragon Age Origins Awakening, head back to the site. It's gdc.gamespot.com.